The chandelier trembled when she clinked her glass. Everyone, Clara's voice cut through the laughter, soft but sharp enough to slice through the chatter. The crowd turned. Her husband, Ethan, still smiling, turned last. Behind her back, Clara's hand tightened around a piece of crumpled paper. The letter that had changed everything 2 hours earlier. The house was glowing in gold and laughter. The kind of night meant for love and toasts, not for truth. Fairy lights twinkled across the backyard. The smell of champagne, grilled steak, and expensive perfume mingled in the air. Guests were pressed, shoulder to shoulder, murmuring birthday wishes and office gossip. Clara could see every face clearly. Every person who had believed in the image she had carefully built with Ethan. The perfect young couple, 6 years married, 2 promotions deep, 1 house with a view. But perfection was a cruel costume. Sophie stood near the cake table, her best friend since college, flawless as always, draped in a silk emerald dress that caught the light every time she moved. She was laughing too hard, too freely, and Ethan's gaze found her more often than the guests noticed. But Clara noticed. She always had. The letter behind her back was shaking now, not from fear, but from control, a tremor trying to contain itself. She'd found it that afternoon while looking for candles in Ethan's study, tucked behind his cuff-link box, labeled simply receipts. The handwriting was unmistakable. Sophie's looping S. The scent of her perfume still faint on the paper. Jasmine and lime, the one she bragged about getting from Paris. Clara hadn't cried when she read it. She just stood there, every word etching itself into her like frostbite. You make me feel seen, Ethan. You make me feel like I can breathe again. Last night was dangerous but worth it. She'll never understand you like I do. Clara had reread that line 5 times before her knees gave out. The penmanship, the way Sophie dotted her eyes with tiny circles. It wasn't just betrayal, it was handwriting turned into a weapon. Now, standing in a house full of witnesses, she smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the kind that comes when pain starts to harden into purpose. Before we cut the cake, she said, raising her glass higher, I'd like to share something special with all of you. A little gift Ethan and I have been keeping between us. The crowd chuckled, expecting romance, maybe a love note, maybe a heartfelt toast. Ethan chuckled too, leaning back in his chair, oblivious to the storm forming in her eyes. Sophie reached for her wine, fingers trembling just enough for Clara to notice. Clara continued, her voice steady, melodic even. It's funny, she said. You think you know someone after 6 years. You think you've seen every side of them. But then, you find words they never meant you to read. Someone whispered, confused. The pianist paused mid-song. The only sound now was the hum of the lights and the slow, uneven beat of Clara's heart. She reached into her clutch and pulled out the folded paper. Her movements were calm, deliberate, the way surgeons move before cutting something open. Ethan's smile faltered. Clara, maybe... She didn't let him finish. She read the first line aloud. I couldn't stop thinking about you after last night. The air went still. Even the wine glasses seemed to stop clinking. Sophie's lips parted in a silent breath. Clara looked up, scanning the faces. Beautiful, isn't it? I didn't write it, of course. I wish I could take credit for such passion. Someone laughed nervously. Someone else gasped. Ethan rose halfway from his chair. Clara, this isn't the time. Oh, it's exactly the time, she said. You see, it's your birthday, and what better gift than honesty? She read again, slower this time, letting the words drip into the silence like poison. You make me feel alive, even when she's right there beside you. Gasps, murmurs. A glass shattered near the counter. Ethan's voice cracked. Stop it. But Clara didn't stop. The tears she'd refused to shed earlier had dried into steel. Every word she spoke now was a knife turning truth into spectacle. When she finally looked at Sophie, her smile was almost gentle. You wrote this one on our anniversary, didn't you? Sophie's face drained of color. The guests froze. No one sure whether to move or stay. The smell of cake icing mixed with panic. The party had become a stage, and Clara its quiet executioner. She folded the letter carefully as though it were something fragile and set it beside the unlit candles on the cake. "Happy birthday, darling," she said softly. "Make a wish." Then she clinked her glass once more, downed her wine in a single swallow, and walked away, the click of her heels echoing louder than the applause that never came. The morning of the party had started like any other. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows, turning the marble counters golden. Clara moved through the quiet house with a list in her hand. Balloons, candles, champagne, the playlist Ethan loved. Every corner was being polished for perfection, every ribbon tied into symmetry. She hummed as she worked, trying to ignore the hollow ache that had been sitting in her chest for months. A kind of sadness she couldn't name. Ethan had left early, saying he had to pick something up. He'd kissed her cheek and said, "Don't peek in the study, that's where your gift is." His smile had been casual, but it hadn't reached his eyes. She remembered noticing that, a flicker of something guarded. When he left, the house fell into silence, the kind that doesn't soothe, but hums with the weight of things unsaid. She went upstairs to gather candles. Ethan always kept extras in the small drawer of his desk, the one labeled receipts. She'd opened it a dozen times before, but this time, as she pulled it open, the corner of a brown envelope caught her eye. It was wedged behind his cufflink box, slightly crumpled, like something hidden in a hurry. Clara wasn't a suspicious woman. She'd always trusted easily, perhaps too easily, but something about the envelope made her pause. It wasn't the object itself, it was the way her pulse reacted, a quiet warning in her blood that she couldn't explain. She reached for it. The handwriting on the front was delicate, unmistakably feminine. Receipts was crossed out, and in smaller letters underneath, written in blue ink, "For you." Her throat tightened. At first, she thought it might be her own surprise gift. A note, a letter, something Ethan had written for her. They used to do that when they were newly married, leave little notes in each other's pockets before work. "Miss you already. Dinner at 7. Love you, E." So she opened it. Inside were several folded pages tied with a white ribbon. Her fingers trembled as she pulled the first one free. She recognized the handwriting instantly. Rounded, stylish, with long tails on the Y's. Sophie, her best friend. Her eyes scanned the first few lines, confusion melting into disbelief. "You looked so handsome last night. I couldn't stop watching you, even when she sat beside you." Her stomach dropped. She read faster. "I know it's wrong, but I don't care. You make me feel alive again. The way you held my hand under the table. I haven't stopped thinking about it." Her vision blurred. There were dates on the letters. Recent ones. 2 weeks ago. 4 days ago. The letters weren't from years past. They were written now. Her knees weakened. The paper trembled in her hands. The air in the study turned heavy, suffocating. She sat down on the floor. Not to think, but to breathe. The words repeated in her head like a cruel song. Sophie's voice, soft and confident, whispering those same phrases in real life. "He's lucky to have you. You two are perfect, perfect." Clara laughed, a sound she didn't recognize. It was too sharp, too broken. She pressed her hand against her chest to steady herself, but her pulse was wild. She went through each letter slowly, her emotions shifting like weather. Shock, disbelief, nausea, anger, and then something quieter, a cold stillness. In the last letter Sophie had written, "I know you said you can't tell her yet, but she'll understand one day. She's strong. She'll survive it." That line did it. The pity embedded in betrayal, the condescension wrapped in care. Clara's tears stopped altogether. Her face hardened. She placed the letters neatly back in the envelope, tied the ribbon again, and stared out the window. The garden looked unreal, too bright, too calm. Somewhere, a bird was singing. She thought about all the times Sophie had come over unannounced, wine in hand, saying, "I just need my best friend tonight." She thought about Ethan's phone lighting up at midnight with messages he claimed were work. She thought about that beach weekend last month, how Sophie had taken all the photos, how Ethan had refused to be in any. The puzzle wasn't missing pieces anymore. It was a completed picture she wished she'd never seen. Her first instinct was to confront Ethan immediately, but the thought of hearing his excuses made her sick. He would deny it, twist it, make her feel crazy. He'd done it before, subtly, when she'd noticed Sophie's perfume on his jacket. No, this time she wouldn't shout. She wouldn't beg. She would wait. The party was only hours away. And everyone, their friends, co-workers, families, would be there. The same people who toasted their love, who admired their unshakable bond. She looked at the letters again, her reflection in the glass cabinet beside her. A woman she barely recognized. Pale, still, eyes hollow. But then something flickered behind her gaze. Not rage, not despair. Purpose. She folded the envelope, slid it into her clutch, and whispered to herself, "If truth wants an audience, I'll give it one." Then she stood up, wiped her tears, and went back to decorating. Because tonight wasn't just Ethan's birthday. It was the funeral of his secrets. By the time the guests began to arrive, Clara looked immaculate, a vision of calm in a satin ivory dress that shimmered beneath the warm lights. Her hair was pinned perfectly, her lipstick precise, not a hint of what lived behind her eyes. She had learned early in life that grief could be disguised as grace, and tonight, that lesson became her armor. The house, their proud suburban jewel, was alive with music and chatter. The caterers moved briskly between tables. Soft jazz hummed through the air. Every corner gleamed with careful preparation, every detail chosen by her hands for a man she no longer recognized. Ethan was already entertaining guests near the patio, that familiar charming grin plastered on his face. He looked relaxed, confident, even proud, as though the world belonged to him and the woman beside him. Sophie. She stood a few feet away, laughing with Ethan's colleagues. Her emerald dress hugged her too tightly, the exact same shade as the one she wore on the night of their anniversary dinner. Clara remembered because Ethan had complimented it. Twice. Their eyes met once across the crowd. Sophie smiled, friendly, innocent, the same smile that had once brought comfort and now only sparked revulsion. Clara smiled back, perfectly. Inside her chest, something burned slow and steady. She moved through the party with poise, greeting everyone, thanking them for coming, pretending the air didn't taste like betrayal. Her voice never cracked, her hand never trembled. Not even when Ethan touched the small of her back, the spot he used to rest his hand when they danced. Now it felt like contamination. "Everything looks incredible, Clara," Ethan said softly. "You outdid yourself." "I wanted it to be unforgettable," she replied. He grinned, not hearing the quiet blade beneath her tone. Every sound felt louder that night. Laughter, glasses clinking, the scrape of forks against plates. But underneath the noise was a rhythm only Clara could hear. The rhythm of calculation. She watched Ethan move through the crowd, the way his gaze followed Sophie when he thought no one noticed. She caught the brief touches, his hand brushing hers when passing a drink, the shared laugh over nothing. Small gestures that screamed everything. Each one added another log to the fire inside her. Sophie had been her maid of honor, her confidant through heartbreaks and career decisions. The friend who'd held her hair when she'd been sick, who'd cried at her wedding more than anyone. That kind of betrayal didn't just cut deep, it rearranged your understanding of love itself. By 8, the night was in full swing. The cake waited on the dining table, a 3-tiered spectacle with golden candles and Ethan's name scripted elegantly across the top. The crowd swelled, champagne refilled, and someone shouted, "Speech! Speech!" Ethan, ever the performer, raised his glass. "I just want to thank my beautiful wife for this incredible night," he said, beaming. "She's the heart of this home, the reason I have something worth celebrating." Applause, smiles. Clara kept hers steady. She'd heard those same words before, the heart of this home, written in Sophie's letter. Only that time it was followed by, "But you told me she doesn't make you feel alive anymore." The irony made her want to laugh. When Ethan kissed her cheek, she could smell Sophie's perfume on his collar. Faint but unmistakable. Jasmine and lime. The scent of treachery. "Thank you, darling," she said, the word darling bitter on her tongue. As Ethan turned to accept hugs and laughter, Clara slipped quietly toward the cake table. The microphone stood nearby, waiting for her cue to announce the candle lighting. She moved the box of letters, now wrapped in soft gold paper and tied with a bow, beside the mic stand. It blended in perfectly among the other gifts. Her plan wasn't reckless. It was deliberate, precise. Every word she would say had been rehearsed in silence that afternoon. She didn't want chaos. She wanted clarity. Clara looked around the room one last time. The friends, the families, the smiles that would soon freeze. And in that moment, she didn't feel broken. She felt powerful. Betrayal had given her something she hadn't had in years: control. Sophie approached her with 2 glasses of champagne. "To us," she said lightly. "We pulled it off. The perfect surprise." Clara's fingers brushed the stem of the glass, her gaze cold but kind. "Yes," she murmured. "Perfect." As Sophie turned away, Clara's smile faded. She knew that in less than 10 minutes, the illusion would shatter. Every secret, every whisper, every stolen touch, exposed. She fixed her gaze on the microphone, steadying her breath. When the clock struck 9, she took her place by the cake table, her clutch resting beside the golden envelope. The pianist started playing softly again. Ethan looked at her expectantly, oblivious to the quiet storm about to break. Clara picked up the microphone and said almost gently, "Before we light the candles, I'd like to read something very close to Ethan's heart." And as she unfolded the letter, the party fell into a silence so deep it could hear its own pulse. The room stilled when she lifted the microphone. Even the string quartet faltered, their bows pausing midair. Clara stood by the cake table, haloed in soft amber light. Her fingers unfolded the paper slowly, the faint crackle echoing louder than the music had moments before. She looked up, smiling as if she were about to tell a joke, and began to read. "I couldn't stop thinking about you after last night." The first line floated out lightly, mistaken by some for poetry. A few guests exchanged amused glances, expecting a romantic toast. Then Clara read the next sentence. "You said you love the way she never notices when we touch." The laughter died. The silence grew dense. Somewhere a fork clinked against glass and didn't move again. Ethan's face drained of color. Sophie froze beside the punch bowl, the stem of her glass trembling. Only the birthday candles flickered, throwing thin shadows across their faces. Clara's tone never wavered. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she said softly. Every word handwritten, every lie inked with care. She read another line, slower now. "Sometimes I wish I could be brave enough to tell her the truth, but I can't bear to hurt her." The crowd shifted. People looked from Clara to Ethan to Sophie, the realization crawling across their expressions like a spreading fire. Ethan stepped forward. "Clara, stop! Not here!" She raised a hand, palm outward. "Why not here? You chose here, didn't you? Our home, our friends, our life. You wrote these words under this roof." Her voice cracked slightly, not from weakness, but from the weight of restraint. "You remember, don't you, Sophie, the night of our anniversary?" Sophie's lips parted. No sound came. Clara lifted another page. "This one's my favorite," she said and read. "You make me feel alive when everything else feels empty." She looked straight at Ethan. "Empty. That's the word, isn't it? The excuse." He reached for the letters, but she stepped back, her heels clicking against the hardwood like gunshots. "Don't," she said, quietly. "You've taken enough." Someone whispered near the back, "Oh my God." Someone else lifted a phone. Clara continued reading, her voice calm, deliberate, each sentence a scalpel cutting through the illusion of a perfect marriage. "Do you know what's funny?" she said between lines. "You always told me honesty was what you loved most about me, so I thought, why not share yours?" The guest didn't move. The air felt heavy, almost physical. Even the candles seemed to hesitate. When she reached the final paragraph, her voice softened. "You ended this one with, 'She deserves better than me.'" She folded the page slowly. "You're right." For a moment, no one breathed. Ethan finally broke. "Enough! This is sick, Clara. You're humiliating yourself." She turned the mic off and placed it gently on the table. Her hands no longer trembled. No, Ethan, she said, her voice steady. I'm reclaiming myself. Then she faced the crowd. Friends who'd toasted their anniversaries, co-workers who'd envied their love. Thank you all for coming, she said, the corners of her mouth curling into something that wasn't quite a smile. I hope you enjoy the cake. It's sweet, though not nearly as sweet as deceit. Gasps rippled through the room. Sophie backed toward the door, her lipstick smeared, eyes glossy with panic. Ethan's hand shot out to stop her, but she flinched away. Clara set the folded letters on the cake, right beside the candles, their edges brushing against the icing. Here, she whispered to him, too quietly for anyone else to hear. Your wish already came true. Then she stepped away from the table. The crowd parted instinctively, giving her space as though she carried fire. She walked past them without hurry, each click of her heels punctuating the end of a chapter she'd been forced to live. At the doorway she paused, glancing back once. Ethan was standing motionless, hands hanging uselessly at his sides. Sophie was crying silently into her palms, and the guests, bewildered, transfixed, looked between them like witnesses at a car crash they couldn't stop watching. Clara took a breath, squared her shoulders, and said the last words she would ever speak in that house. Happy birthday, Ethan. Then she left, leaving behind the echo of her voice, the stunned silence of the crowd, and a table covered in cake, candlelight, and the ashes of truth. The front door closed behind her with a sound that felt final. Not loud, just heavy, like the period at the end of a long, cruel sentence. Outside, the night air was cool, carrying the faint hum of laughter still spilling from the house. It felt obscene, the way people could still talk, still breathe, while her world had just split down the middle. Clara's heels clicked against the driveway, steady and deliberate, though her hands shook. Behind her, the lights of the house glowed too warmly, too cheerfully. The windows were still open. Voices drifted out in broken pieces. She could hear Ethan calling her name, once, twice, and then Sophie's sobs overlapping. She didn't turn back. Her car was parked under the street lamp, the same one that used to light the nights she and Ethan would walk home holding hands. Now its glow felt foreign, mechanical. She slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and sat there for a long moment, staring through the windshield without seeing anything at all. The adrenaline began to fade, leaving only the ache, raw and deep, sitting somewhere between her throat and chest. Her fingers brushed her collarbone, as though checking if her heart was still there. She'd imagined betrayal before, hypothetically, in stories, in friends' lives, in passing fears that she'd dismissed as paranoia. But she had never known that it didn't come like a stab. It came like drowning, slow, inevitable, with moments of silence in between. She drove without direction, the road stretching ahead in streaks of wet asphalt and scattered lights. It had started to rain lightly, soft drops tapping against the windshield. She welcomed it. The noise filled the quiet space inside her that was too big, too empty. By the time she reached the ocean, the sky had opened completely. Rain poured in sheets, blurring the horizon into gray. She parked by the cliffside where the waves crashed violently below, the same spot she and Ethan had come to on their first anniversary. They'd carved their initials into the wooden railing back then. She could still see the faint E plus a C scratched into the surface, softened by time but still there, mocking her with its permanence. Clara stepped out, letting the rain soak her dress, her hair, her makeup. She didn't wipe it away. The cold stung her skin, but it felt honest. The first honest thing she'd felt in months. She gripped the railing, looking out at the dark ocean. For the first time since she found the letters, she cried. Not the restrained, quiet tears of control, but the kind that tore through her, the kind that made sound. Her shoulders shook, and her voice broke in the storm. It wasn't for Ethan. It wasn't even for Sophie. It was for herself, for the years she had spent being small, forgiving, understanding, for the woman she'd been told to be. She remembered the night she met Ethan, the way he had looked at her like she was something rare. She remembered Sophie standing beside her at the wedding, whispering, "You got lucky. He's one of the good ones." The irony hit like a slap. When her tears finally slowed, she felt lighter, not better, not healed, but emptied of something toxic. She climbed back into the car, turned on the heater, and stared at her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her mascara had bled down her cheeks, her lipstick smudged, but her eyes looked clearer than they had in years. Her phone buzzed. Ethan's name lighting up the screen. She stared at it until it stopped ringing. A minute later, another message appeared. Ethan, please, we need to talk. Don't do anything stupid. A bitter laugh escaped her. Stupid. That was his word for everything he didn't understand. Her feelings, her instincts, her silence. She typed a single reply. Clara, no need. You've already said enough. Then she turned off the phone and dropped it into the passenger seat. The rain softened to a drizzle. She leaned her head against the window, watching the waves blur into the fog. Somewhere between exhaustion and clarity, a new thought formed. Not revenge, not hatred, but something colder and cleaner. Ethan had built his life on the illusion of control. Sophie had built hers on stolen affection. Clara had built hers on faith, and faith, once broken, leaves behind something far more dangerous than rage. It leaves purpose. By the time dawn began to break, pale light cutting through gray clouds, she had made her decision. She wouldn't scream. She wouldn't beg. She wouldn't even explain. She would do what Ethan never expected her to do. She would move on, but not empty-handed. Clara turned the key in the ignition, her lips curving into the faintest, most exhausted smile. As she drove home, she whispered into the quiet car, "You'll regret underestimating me." And the rain, soft now, answered like applause. Ethan called for 3 days straight. At first it was anger, sharp and defensive. How could you humiliate me like that? Then it shifted into pleading. We can fix this, Clara. It was just a mistake. By the 4th day, his voice had lost its edge entirely. Please, I can't sleep. You're my wife. Clara listened once. Just once. She didn't say a word. Then she hung up and blocked his number. The house had gone silent after the party. She hadn't returned since that night. Only sent for a locksmith the next morning. The locks were changed before noon. The cleaning service scrubbed every trace of confetti, spilled champagne, and candle wax from the floors. What couldn't be cleaned, the scent of betrayal, still lingered, but it no longer belonged to her. She'd moved into a quiet apartment by the bay, the kind of place where mornings began with the sound of seagulls instead of apologies. The walls were bare, the furniture simple, but every corner felt hers. There was no Ethan, no Sophie, just the echo of her own breathing and the steady rhythm of healing. On the 4th morning, she met with her lawyer. Mrs. Hale, he said gently, glancing over the documents, you do realize that all assets are under your name, correct? The house, the car, even the joint account. Legally, you've been the sole proprietor since his last business trip. Clara nodded, expression unreadable. Yes, she said. He insisted on it for tax purposes. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Ethan's arrogance had written his own downfall months ago, signing papers he never thought she'd use. What would you like to do? The lawyer asked. Clara leaned back in the chair, tracing the edge of the folder with her nail. Transfer the savings, liquidate what we can. He'll figure out soon enough what betrayal costs. There was no venom in her tone, only precision. Revenge, she'd learned, didn't need to be loud. It just needed to be final. That afternoon, she went back to the house one last time. Not to confront, but to close. The driveway was empty except for Ethan's silver car. The front door, newly locked, clicked open under her key. Inside, the air felt stale. Birthday decorations still hung limply from the ceiling, half-deflated balloons hovering like ghosts. The cake, untouched since that night, sat in the fridge, the top layer missing where she'd placed the letters. She walked through each room slowly, touching nothing. The study still smelled faintly of his cologne. Her fingers trailed along the desk, the same one where she'd found Sophie's letters. There was a new one now, lying open, a note in Ethan's handwriting. I know you hate me, but please don't ruin us. I can't lose you. She smiled faintly, but her eyes were dry. She tore the note in half and left it there. When Ethan arrived later that evening, the house was quiet. Clara was waiting for him in the kitchen, wearing the same dress she'd worn at the party. Washed, pressed, ghostly in the fading light. He froze in the doorway. "You came back." "I came to end it," she said calmly. Ethan's shoulders sagged. "Clara, I made a mistake." "No," she interrupted. "You made a choice." He looked older. The arrogance gone, replaced with desperation. It meant nothing. It was loneliness. Loneliness. She almost laughed. "You had me beside you every night, Ethan. You had a life people envied. You just wanted more mirrors to admire yourself in." He flinched. She stepped closer, her tone even. "Do you know what's strange? You spent years building your image. The perfect husband, the charming host, the man everyone trusted. And it took me one evening to dismantle it. Words you wrote with your own hand did that." Ethan's jaw clenched. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing," she said simply. "I've already taken everything you thought you owned." He frowned. "What do you mean?" She reached into her bag and placed a stack of signed papers on the counter. "The accounts, the car, the house. You won't find your cards working anymore. You'll have enough to start over, but not enough to pretend you're the same man." For the first time, Ethan's mask cracked completely. His voice broke. "You can't do this." Clara tilted her head. "Can I? You gave me your trust in writing, and for once I decided to honor it." She stepped past him toward the door. He reached out instinctively, his hand brushing her wrist. She didn't pull away. She just looked at him. "Ethan," she said softly, "I read your letters aloud so you'd finally hear them." Then she walked out, the same way she had that night, only this time, she didn't look back. Outside, the sky had turned a bruised shade of violet. The ocean wind carried the faint scent of salt and rain. She breathed it in deeply, eyes closing. For the first time in years, the air didn't taste like compromise. Inside the house, Ethan sank to the floor, surrounded by silence. The same silence he'd once left her in. Clara got into her car, rolled down the window and whispered, "Goodbye." And as the last light faded behind her, it wasn't regret she felt. It was freedom. Sharp, clean, and final.